Imagine a doctor telling you that to cure your chronic pain, you basically you have to completely abandon the desire to be cured.
Right.
Or, imagine being told that the only way to fix this profound underlying stress in your life is to just entirely stop trying to fix it.
Which is, I mean, that's completely backwards to how we usually think.
To the modern Western mind, yeah,
Yeah.
that sounds absolutely insane. It sounds like giving up.
Totally.
Because usually when we talk about solving a problem, there's this deeply ingrained expectation of, like, engineering.
Yes, exactly. Cause and effect.
Right. We think of ourselves as machines. You identify the broken part, you find the right conceptual wrench, you tighten the bolt, and boom, the machine is fixed.
We want the roadmap.
We want a roadmap.
Yeah.
We want an app that optimizes our brain so we can just get back to being relentlessly productive.
Well, it's a super comforting illusion, isn't it? We crave that linear progression, like if I do X, I will achieve Y.
Right, the formula.
Exactly. But the moment you step into the world of human consciousness, and specifically into the really deep waters of ancient Eastern thought, that entire mechanical worldview it shatters.
The wrench doesn't fit anymore.
The wrench does not fit. The map is completely blank. And what you're left with is this terrifying, but honestly beautiful and deeply frustrating paradox.
Which is exactly where we are starting today. Welcome to the deep dive. We are taking you on a massive, really expansive journey today.
It is a big one.
Yeah, we are charting the course of Zen Buddhism. But, we're not just staying in the misty 6th century monasteries of China or ancient Japan.
No, we're following the ideas forward.
Right, we're tracking how these ancient, notoriously paradoxical ideas migrated across oceans and centuries, how they wound their way into modern Western psychology, down into the clinical, fluorescent-lit basements of American hospitals.
And eventually right into the physical design of the Apple computer mouse sitting on your desk.
Literally the mouse on your desk. It's wild. So the mission of this deep dive is to figure out how this elusive, often fiercely misunderstood spiritual practice became this highly practical, secular toolkit for surviving the modern world.
Because it really is a lineage of thought that fundamentally rewired how we approach human suffering.
It did, and we have an incredible stack of material guiding this conversation. We're pulling from foundational texts, starting with D.T. Suzuki's 1934 classic, An Introduction to Zen Buddhism.
A hugely important book.
And then moving into the 1960s counterculture with Shinryu Suzuki's famous Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind.
Which is just a staple.
Yeah. We're also unpacking some pretty heavy academic papers that analyze the actual phenomenology of Zen. So like what literally happens in the brain and the subjective experience of a practitioner.
And their literary transmission. Yeah.
Exactly. And crucially, our ultimate destination is the work of Dr. Jon Kabat-Zinn.
The MIT-trained microbiologist.
Right, the microbiologists who took these ancient principles, basically stripped them of all their religious vocabulary and translated them into the clinical world of mindfulness-based stress reduction, or MBSR.
And while we are going to cover centuries of philosophy and some incredibly rigorous clinical data today, the ultimate goal of Zen and the whole underlying pulse of this conversation is strikingly simple.
It's not magic, right?
No, it's not about acquiring magical powers. It's not about achieving some levitating supernatural state of perpetual bliss. The fundamental mission here is simply waking up to the present moment.
So our objective for you today is to totally demystify Zen. We're going to strip away the pop culture cliches.
The bamboo plants.
Right, the commercialized idea that Zen just means having a minimalist living room or being this perfectly relaxed, unbothered person at the office. We're deeply exploring how Jon Kabat-Zinn distilled centuries of this philosophy into 9 practical attitudes of mindfulness.
Which are tools you can actually use.
Exactly. 9 specific clinical tools you can use to navigate your life without feeling constantly crushed by information overload and modern anxiety.
But to understand how those 9 modern tools actually function, we can't just jump straight to the hospital basement. We really have to start at the very beginning.
We have to lay the groundwork.
Right. We have to understand the fundamental shock that Zen presents to the Western way of thinking. You can't use the tools until you understand the philosophical earthquake that actually created them.
Okay, so let's get into that earthquake. Because to understand what Zen actually is, D.T. Suzuki makes it aggressively clear that we first have to grapple with what it isn't.
Yes.
D.T. Suzuki was this brilliant Japanese scholar who basically took it upon himself to translate the untranslatable for the West. He publishes an introduction to Zen Buddhism in 1934.
And the reaction was huge.
It caused such a profound ripple that Carl Jung, like the legendary Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung, actually wrote the foreword to the German edition.
Which is incredibly telling because Jung's foreword is essentially this massive flashing warning label.
Like a hazard sign.
Yeah, Jung explicitly tells the Western reader that Zen is going to be near impossible for their minds to grasp. He basically says, prepare to be entirely frustrated by what you are about to read.
He's practically offering his condolences before you even start chapter 1.
Pretty much.
And as you read Suzuki, you immediately see why. Zen actively rebels against everything our Western scientific logical minds rely on to navigate reality.
We desperately want to categorize things.
We really do. We want to put concepts into neat little boxes with clear labels.
Yeah.
But Suzuki defines Zen almost entirely in the negative. He spends chapters just demolishing categories.
He tells you Zen is not a philosophy.
Right. It's not a theology. It has no sacred texts that demand your literal belief. It's not a systematic ethical code.
And the diagnosis Suzuki offers for the Western mind here is just brilliant. He argues that we suffer from what he calls the tyranny of name and logic.
The tyranny of logic.
Yeah. In the West, particularly since the Enlightenment, we carry this deep-seated belief that if we can name a thing and apply logical deduction to it, we've mastered it.
We think the label is the reality.
Exactly. We think understanding the label is the same as understanding the reality. But Suzuki points out that logic is inherently dualistic.
Okay, let's pause there and make sure we define dualistic thinking clearly because that word gets thrown around so much in philosophy.
Absolutely. So dualistic thinking is the foundational mechanism of logic. It's the separation of reality into A and not A.
Subject and object.
Subject and object. The observer and the observed. Inside and outside. Black and white. When I look at a tree, dualism says I am the observer here and the tree is the object over there.
There's a distance.
Right. Logic requires that distance. It traps us in concepts of space and time. And Suzuki writes that as long as you're conscious of space and time, as long as you are holding on to that separation, Zen will keep a respectable distance from you.
He calls it a tyranny. And the examples he uses in the text literally make your brain glitch. Like, he says that in the practice of Zen, coal is not black.
Or the flower's not red.
Right, which immediately makes the Western reader want to throw the book across the room, like we know coal is black. But Suzuki claims this contradiction is actually a higher affirmation.
That phrase, higher affirmation, is the key to unlocking what he's doing here. Because in Western logic, A is A and A is not B. Coal is black. The flower is red.
Simple.
But Suzuki explains that if you want to reach the actual lived, visceral truth of existence, you have to smash through that dualistic framework. You have to realize the concept of A is not A.
So by saying the flower's not red, the Zen master isn't like failing a basic vision test. They're trying to free you from the concept of redness.
Precisely. Because the moment you look at a rose and say, oh, that is a red flower, your brain stops actually seeing the unique living organism in front of you.
You just file it away.
Yeah, you filed it away in the mental folder labeled red flowers. You've substituted the raw experience for a conceptual label. By telling you the flower is not red, the master is forcing your brain to drop the label and actually experience the flower itself.
Directly.
Directly, without the filtering mechanism of human language.
It makes me think about trying to explain the taste of salt using only mathematics.
Oh, that's a good one.
Right. Like, you can write out the chemical formula for sodium chloride. You can calculate the exact geometric structure of the crystalline lattice. You could write hundreds of pages of complex equations detailing exactly how the sodium ions interact with the taste receptors on the human tongue.
But it wouldn't taste like anything.
Exactly. No matter how perfect that math is, none of those equations will ever actually give you the experience of tasting salt. You can't calculate it. You just have to put it on your tongue.
That is a phenomenal way to look at it. The math, the chemistry, the labels, those are the superstructure of concepts. They are useful, but they are not the reality. The actual taste of the salt on your tongue is the personal experience.
It's the territory.
Yes. And Suzuki's entire argument is that direct, unmediated personal experience is everything in Zen. Without the backing of raw experience, all the philosophies and logical framework in the world are just empty scaffolding.
Which created a massive literary problem for Suzuki.
Oh, totally.
Because he's writing a book to explain that you cannot explain Zen in a book. It's a total paradox. But the academic papers analyzing his work point out this brilliant stylistic technique he uses to get around that problem. Scholars call it a mirror in the text,
Yeah, instead of delivering a dry, objective, historical timeline of Zen Buddhism, Suzuki fills the pages with what are known as encounter dialogues.
which are basically ancient stories.
Right, these ancient canonized stories detailing intense, often bizarre interactions between Zen masters and their students.
And these stories are wild. Like,
Mhm.
a student will approach a master and ask this profound existential question, like, what is the fundamental nature of the Buddha?
And the master just does something random.
Right? Instead of giving a philosophical lecture, the master kicks a ball, or lifts a single finger, or in some really famous cases, literally slaps the student across the face.
Which seems absurd to us. But the academic critique highlights that Suzuki uses these jarring stories to force the reader into the exact same dynamic as the confused student.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, as you read these encounter dialogues, your logical mind tries to decipher the hidden meaning behind the slap or the lifted finger. You act like a detective trying to solve a puzzle.
Yeah.
And you fail. It exhausts your logical mind. The text becomes a mirror reflecting your own frantic desire to conceptualize everything. Suzuki is not trying to describe the experience of spiritual awakening, what Zen calls satori. He is actively trying to induce the frustration that leads to it.
Okay, so Suzuki brings this framework to the West, and he establishes that logic is a tyrant that keeps us trapped in concepts. But practically speaking, how do practitioners actually break those logical habits?
Right, how do you do it?
Because it's one thing to nod along and agree that coal is not black while reading a book in your living room, but I still have to go to the grocery store, calculate my budget, and use logic to navigate my daily life. I can't just slap the cashier when they ask for my credit card.
Probably a bad idea, yeah. This is where we move from the philosophy to the actual cognitive technology of Zen. And it brings us to one of the most famous and, frankly, deeply misunderstood mental tools ever developed.
The koan.
The koan.
Let's talk about koans, because pop culture has completely distorted what they are. J.D. Salinger famously popularized the most well-known koan in the West. What is the sound of one hand clapping?
Right.
And people often treat them like cute little brain teasers or poetic riddles. But reading the classical texts, these are intense, impossible, reality-breaking demands.
They are not riddles meant to be solved. They are intellectual brick walls meant to be crashed into.
Wow.
Some of the classic examples are incredibly visceral, like stop the sound of a distant temple bell, or show me an unmovable tree in a heavy wind. Or, my absolute favorite, which is just delightfully absurd, take out a 5-storied pagoda from a teapot.
It almost feels like a mental DDoS attack.
Oh, how so?
You know how a hacker can take down a website by flooding its servers with millions of impossible requests all at once until the server just panics and crashes?
Yeah.
The koan feels like a deliberate DDoS attack on your own prefrontal cortex. You hear, take a 5-storied pagoda from a teapot, and your brain immediately tries to engineer a solution. You think, okay, maybe it's a tiny ceramic model of a pagoda. Or maybe the steam rising from the tea leaves looks like the shape of a tree. You search for the metaphor.
But searching for the metaphor is exactly the trap.
Right.
The intellect immediately tries to engineer a logical bridge. But the academic studies we reviewed regarding the phenomenology of koan meditation deeply explore what is actually happening in a meditator's brain during this process. The researchers described the koan as an attempt to sneak up on your mind.
I love that phrasing, sneaking up on the mind,
Yeah.
because our logical mind is like a hyper-vigilant guard dog.
Yes.
It never rests, it never lets its guard down, and is always categorizing threats and opportunities.
Exactly. When a Zen practitioner sits with a koan, and we need to be clear, they might meditate on a single koan for months or even years.
Years. Wow.
Years. They're forcing their intellect into a wrestling match with the impossible. You roll the words over and over in your head. Take a 5-storied pagoda from a teapot. Logic tries to solve it. It fails.
It tries another angle.
It fails. It gets frustrated. It tries a metaphorical approach. It fails. The cognitive friction is immense. Eventually, the logical mind simply exhausts itself. It runs out of conceptual fuel.
The server crashes.
The server crashes. And when that logical program finally shuts down, when you stop trying to solve the teapot, what is left? Pure, unmediated awareness. You transcend the rigid boundaries of the self that logic created.
That's incredible.
The academic studies note that this specific cognitive exhaustion strips away our implicit biases and attributions. When the mind stops constantly associating and judging and attempting to conquer the moment, it can finally just rest in the present.
There's a quote from a long-term practitioner in one of those phenomenological studies that really stuck with me. They said that when life gets completely fragmented, when the chaos of reality is overwhelming, the years of training with the koan help them short-circuit the panic.
Yeah.
They just stop, breathe, and say, do what's in front of you. Just do what's in front of you.
It's the ultimate pragmatic outcome of an absurd exercise. By practicing the impossible on the meditation cushion, you train your brain to recognize when it is making automatic, unhelpful associations or projecting prejudices onto reality.
You learn to set aside the habitual responses.
Exactly. You stop fighting the concept of the problem and you just deal with the reality of what is in front of you.
Okay, so D.T. Suzuki brings this incredible, almost aggressive intellectual framework of Zen to the West in the 1930s. He's blowing up Western logic and challenging psychoanalysts like Jung. But as we move forward in time to the 1960s, a different Suzuki arrives in America.
Shunryu Suzuki.
Shunryu Suzuki. And just to clarify for everyone, there's no relation to D.T. Suzuki.
Right, completely different guy.
And if D.T. brought the formidable intellect of Zen, Shunryu brought the lived, sweaty, physical practice of Zen to the counterculture of California.
It was a monumental shift. Shunryu Suzuki founded the San Francisco Zen Center in 1962. His teachings were eventually compiled into a book called Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. And it is not an exaggeration to say this is arguably one of the most influential spiritual texts of the 20th century.
For sure.
It shifted Zen from a philosophical curiosity for academics into a daily practice for regular people.
And it is so relentlessly practical. He introduces this core concept right away called Shoshin, which translates directly to beginner's mind. And there is this legendary quote from the prologue of the book. In the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities, but in the expert's, there are few.
It is a profound, almost uncomfortable inversion of how we are taught to value knowledge.
Because we all want to be experts.
In Western culture, we desperately want to be experts. We spend our lives accumulating degrees, certifications, titles. We want the roadmap, the assumptions, and the shortcuts that come with mastery. We want to be the person in the room who already knows the answer.
But Shunryu Suzuki argues that those very habits of the expert actually blind you. It's the arrogance of expertise.
Yes.
If you're a botanist and you think you already know everything about a particular flower, you stop actually looking at the flower.
Yeah.
You just see your own knowledge reflected back at you. The beginner's mind is empty. It's open. It's free of the arrogant assumption that it already knows how the world works.
And it allows you to see things as they truly are, fresh and new, every single time you encounter them.
Right. And importantly, he didn't just teach beginner's mind as an abstract, poetic idea to think about while you go about your day. He caught it as a rigorous physical discipline.
The physical posture is key.
Yeah, the texts provide the exact, uncompromising physical instructions for Zazen, which is the practice of seated meditation. It's crucial to understand that Zazen is not just sitting around relaxing with your eyes closed. It is highly specific.
It sounds intensely demanding, actually. It's about taking total ownership of your physical body in space.
Right.
The instructions are incredibly precise. Your spine must be perfectly straight. Your ears and shoulders must be aligned. You are instructed to push up toward the ceiling with the back of your head as if you're supporting the sky. You pull your chin in.
And the positioning of the hands is equally precise. You form what is called the cosmic mudra.
Which is very beautiful visually.
It is. You place your left hand on top of your right, middle joints perfectly aligned together, your thumbs lightly touch each other, forming this beautiful, continuous oval. The text says you have to hold this posture with great care, as if you were holding something very precious in your hand.
Like a fragile glass object.
Exactly. And there's a practical reason for this. If your mind drifts into a daydream, your thumbs will naturally pull apart or slump together. The body reveals the state of the mind. If you slump, you lose yourself. You are no longer residing in your body.
This physicality is so crucial because it proves that Zen is not an escape hatch from reality. It's not about floating away into some detached, ethereal trance. It is an absolute heavy immersion into the physical present. You are existing right here, right now, holding the mudra, supporting the sky with the crown of your head.
And then, once the posture is set, there's the breathing. This is where Shunryu Suzuki offers a metaphor that fundamentally changes how one experiences respiration. He says the breath is just a swinging door between the inner world and the outer world.
It's such a vivid image. He writes, when we inhale, the air comes into the inner world. When we exhale, the air goes out to the outer world. There is just one whole world.
But then he pushes it further and says that if you sit there and think the thought, I breathe, the I is extra. There is no you to say I.
I'm curious how you interpreted that, actually, because that is the exact point where a lot of Westerners throw their hands up. What does he mean, the I is extra? Who else is doing the breathing?
Right. I was really struggling with this concept, but think of it like a metal turnstile at a busy subway station.
Okay.
If the breath is the stream of commuters pushing through the turnstile, the ego, the I, is like a guy standing next to the turnstile, loudly taking credit for every single person who walks through.
Oh, wow.
Right. He's standing there going, I moved that person, I made that person walk through, I am doing this.
Hmm.
Zen asks us to realize that the movement is just happening naturally. The air comes in, the air goes out. We are just the swinging turnstile.
We don't need to stand there taking credit for a biological process.
Exactly. The universe is doing it for us.
That turnstile analogy captures it perfectly. The ego's desperate need to claim ownership over the present moment is exhausting. And this realization leads directly into Shunryu Suzuki's concept of what happens when your mind inevitably wanders during meditation.
Because everyone's mind wanders.
Everyone's. People constantly quit meditation because they think they are bad at it. They sit down, their brain immediately starts thinking about their grocery list or an argument from 5 years ago, and they conclude they've failed.
But Suzuki introduces this incredibly compassionate concept called mind weeds.
The mind weeds are brilliant. It's an agricultural metaphor. He says that if you sit in meditation and try to forcefully, violently stop your thinking, it means you're bothered by it. You are fighting the natural waves of your own mind, which just creates more turbulence.
Instead, you just let the thoughts come and you let them go.
He says, we pull the weeds and bury them near the plant to give it nourishment. It changes the entire paradigm of distraction, the struggles, the random memories, the anxieties that pop up during your practice. Those are the weeds.
You don't set them on fire.
You don't hate yourself for having them. You use them. Every single time you notice your mind wandering to that argument from 5 years ago, and you gently, without judgment, your attention back to the breath, that specific act of returning is the nourishment that grows your awareness.
You're actually building the muscle of mindfulness.
Right. Without the weeds, you cannot grow the plant. You should be grateful for the distractions.
Okay, so let's look at the map we have drawn so far. We have ancient Japanese monks slapping students. We have D.T. Suzuki in the 1930s dismantling Western logic. We have Shunryu Suzuki in the 1960s teaching counterculture kids in San Francisco how to sit like mountains and compost their mind weeds.
A pretty wild journey.
But how does this highly ascetic, ego-destroying, anti-materialist practice infiltrate the very pinnacle of global capitalism and consumer technology? Because it seems like an impossible leap.
It seems impossible until you look closely at one specific individual who served as the bridge between the San Francisco Zen Center and Silicon Valley. We have to talk about Steve Jobs.
Yes, the journey from the Zendo to Silicon Valley. Yeah. The history here is wild. Steve Jobs drops out of Reed College. He's this wandering barefoot seeker. He travels to India at age 19 searching for enlightenment, comes back to the Bay Area deeply changed, and ends up studying directly under Shunryu Suzuki.
Not only Shunryu Suzuki, but Jobs studied intensely with one of Suzuki's primary disciples, a monk named Kobun Chino Otagawa.
Okay.
And this wasn't just a casual weekend retreat relationship. Jobs and Otagawa met almost every day. They went on long, silent meditation retreats together. Their relationship was so profound that years later, when Jobs was ousted from Apple and founded NXT Computer, he officially listed Otagawa on the corporate payroll as the spiritual director of the company.
Jobs was so devoted that he seriously considered abandoning technology altogether to move to Japan and become a Zen monk.
He really did.
But Otagawa told him no. He told Jobs that his monastery was in California and his practice was in building things. And when you look at what Jobs built, you can see the DNA of Zen all over Apple.
It's undeniable when you know what to look for. For over 1,300 years, Zen has instilled a fierce commitment to austerity, resoluteness, and rigorous simplicity. It is an aesthetic of stripping away everything that is not absolutely essential.
Right.
When Steve Jobs applied that ancient monastic aesthetic to consumer technology, it became what we now recognize as Apple's insane simplicity.
The sources detail a mind-blowing specific example of this translation from monastery to tech hardware. It involves the evolution of the original Apple signature mouse.
Yeah, this is super cool.
The original, single-button, perfectly curved mouse. From an industrial design perspective, it was the exact equivalent of the Enso.
For those unfamiliar, the Enso is the fundamental hand-drawn Zen circle. It's traditionally drawn in one fluid, uninhibited stroke of black ink on white paper. It is not a mathematically perfect circle. It shows the brushstroke, the beginning and the end.
It represents enlightenment, strength, elegance, the universe, and the void.
Exactly. It's the ultimate expression of beginner's mind in art. By bringing that singular, unbroken curve into the physical design of the mouse, Jobs was trying to make technology intuitive, uncluttered, and deeply human. He wanted a computer to feel as natural as a brushstroke.
But it wasn't just about how the plastic shells of the products looked, right? The Zen influence went much deeper into how Jobs actually ran the company and anticipated the future.
Yes, his whole approach.
He explicitly used his Zen meditation practice to train what he called his empathy muscles. He famously infuriated traditional marketing executives because he absolutely refused to use focus groups.
Right, he hated focus
He
groups.
said his job wasn't to give people what they said they wanted, it was to give them what they didn't even know they needed yet.
Which requires an incredibly high level of intuitive observation. As Jobs told his biographer Walter Isaacson, if you just sit and observe your restless mind, and eventually it calms down, your intuition starts to blossom. You stop reacting to the noise of the moment, and you see a tremendous expanse in the present.
You see the deeper currents of human desire.
Exactly. That cultivated, non-judging awareness allowed Jobs to intuit the needs of his customers on a profound level. For Jobs, sitting in silent meditation and aggressively growing a multi-billion-dollar tech empire were not opposing endeavors. They were deeply integrated expressions of the same practice.
So Zen philosophy essentially helps build the iPhone. It shapes the modern digital world. But while Jobs was utilizing Zen to revolutionize how we interact with machines, a microbiologist over on the East Coast at MIT was realizing that this exact same meditative practice held the potential to revolutionize how we interact with our own feeling bodies.
And this brings us to arguably one of the most consequential developments in the history of modern Western medicine. We've arrived at the work of Dr. John Kabat-Zinn.
The year is 1979. John Kabat-Zinn is working at the University of Massachusetts Medical School.
Yeah.
And he has this quiet, devastating realization.
He's looking around the hospital.
Yeah, he's looking around and seeing countless patients falling right through the cracks of the modern healthcare system. These are people with severe, intractable chronic pain, paralyzing anxiety, chronic psoriasis, cardiovascular disease.
And the doctors have done all the engineering they can do.
Right? They've prescribed the pills, done the surgeries, applied the medical wrench, but the machine is still broken. The patients are still suffering. And the medical establishment essentially pats them on the shoulder and says, well, there's nothing more we can do. You just have to learn to live with it.
It was a profound failure of care. Because, as Kabat-Zinn noted, telling someone they just have to learn to live with it is completely useless if no one is actually teaching them how to live with it.
Absolutely.
So Kabat-Zinn does something radical. He founds the stress reduction clinic in a cramped room in the basement of the hospital. He takes the profound, rigorous practices of Soto Zen, Vipassana meditation, and Hatha yoga, and he executes a brilliant pivot. He completely strips away the religious context.
He essentially takes the Buddhism out of the Buddhism.
Exactly. He removes what religious scholars call the soteriological goals. Soteriology is the study of salvation. In traditional Buddhism, the goal of meditation is often framed around escaping the cycle of rebirth, achieving nirvana, or attaining spiritual enlightenment.
Right.
Kabat-Zinn recognized that if he talked about nirvana to a 50-year-old truck driver suffering from debilitating back pain in a Massachusetts hospital, he would lose the patient immediately.
They'd walk right out.
Yeah. So he framed the ancient practices entirely within a scientific, clinical, secular context. He operationalized it. He renamed the practice mindfulness-based stress reduction, or MBSR.
And the incredible thing is, it works. The clinical data starts pouring in. And it really works. He defines mindfulness in this beautifully accessible way. The awareness that arises through paying attention on purpose in the present moment, non-judgmentally.
It's so clean.
And there's this incredibly powerful anecdote detailing the early days of the clinic involving an MIT professor.
Yes, this story perfectly captures the essence of what MBSR became. The professor was facing a brutal medical ordeal. He needed a bone marrow transplant, which required him to be placed in severe isolation to prevent infection.
Which is terrifying.
Knowing how psychologically taxing this would be, he enrolled in Kabat-Zinn's MBSR course to prepare his mind. And after just a few classes sitting in a circle in the hospital basement, he realized something profound. He felt more seen, more comfortable, and more connected with the random strangers in his MBSR group people from entirely different social classes and backgrounds than he did with his own elite faculty colleagues at MIT.
The professor said, this is the community of the afflicted, and we acknowledge the affliction. The faculty is also the community of the afflicted, but we don't acknowledge our affliction at all.
That's such a heavy realization.
He had this epiphany While riding the subway, he looked around at the tired faces on the train and realized that all of humanity is the community of the afflicted. We are all dealing with stress, chronic pain, aging, grief, and uncertainty. The genius of MBSR was simply giving people a structured, clinical permission slip to finally acknowledge it.
And the psychology journals we reviewed connect Kabat-Zinn's work directly back to William James, who is often considered the father of American psychology.
Oh.
Over a century ago, William James pointed out that the greatest educational paradigm humanity could ever invent would be a system that trains the wandering attention.
And Kabat-Zinn built it.
Kabat-Zinn actually built that paradigm, but he did it by fusing what Buddhist scholars call bare attention with clear knowing.
Let's break those terms down.
Bare attention is simply noticing what is happening, feeling the pain in your knee, or noticing the anxiety in your chest. But if you just notice the pain, you might panic. Clear knowing is noticing the pain, but understanding its impermanent nature. It's observing the sensation with a wisdom that transforms your relationship to your own suffering. You realize the pain is just a sensation. It is not you.
Which brings us to the absolute core focus of our deep dive today. This is where the rubber meets the road. To make this vast, ancient wisdom functional for you, the listener, who is likely trying to survive morning traffic, looming deadlines, and a hyper-connected, anxious world of Kransist. Jon Kabat-Zinn distilled the essence of Zen and mindfulness into 9 practical attitudes.
And these are not just nice, poetic ideas to stick on a refrigerator magnet. They are clinical tools. They are the foundational psychological pillars of MBSR. If you practice these attitudes, you literally alter the neural pathways in your brain.
Let's go through them deeply. This is the ultimate toolkit for the modern mind. Attitude number 1, non-judging.
Non-judging is the bedrock of the entire practice. It means acting as an impartial witness to your own experience, observing your thoughts, feelings, and bodily sensations without immediately slapping a label of good or bad onto them.
Because we judge everything.
Everything. The human brain spends an exorbitant amount of metabolic energy categorizing every microevent. I hate this feeling. This traffic is terrible. I need to keep feeling this joy. Non-judging invites you to just experience the raw sensation of the moment without the commentary.
To understand the physical mechanism of this, there's a fascinating clinical study involving war veterans suffering from PTSD. The researchers found that mindful non-judging was an incredibly effective treatment technique because it breaks the neurological loop of secondary stress.
Let's explain that loop. If you experience a sudden pain or a traumatic memory arises, that is the primary stress. It's unavoidable. It's a biological reality.
Right.
But the secondary stress is what your brain does a microsecond later. Your brain starts screaming, this is terrible, I shouldn't be feeling this is going to ruin my whole day. Why am I so broken?
And that amps everything up.
That secondary stress releases a flood of cortisol and adrenaline, amplifying the suffering tenfold. Non-judging doesn't stop the primary pain, but it completely cuts off the secondary stress. You feel the pain, but you drop the catastrophic narrative about the pain.
You stop throwing gasoline on the fire.
Exactly.
Attitude number 2 is patience, allowing things to unfold in their own time.
Which is agonizingly difficult in a world built on Amazon Prime delivery speeds and instant gratification. But patience is a form of wisdom. It's recognizing that every process has its own natural, unrushable rhythm. You cannot pull a flower out of the ground to make it grow faster.
And the clinical data on patience is actually quite shocking. Researchers use an assessment called the 3-factor patience scale. It measures interpersonal patience, how you deal with annoying people, patience with life hardships, and patience with daily hassles, like standing in a long line at the grocery store.
Right, and developing this attitude across those 3 domains plays a vital role in human longevity, specifically in helping cardiovascular patients.
That's amazing.
Cultivating patience reduces chronic anger, which lowers blood pressure and arterial inflammation. It builds physiological resilience. Practicing patience literally protects your heart.
Attitude number 3, beginner's mind. We touched on this with Shunryu Suzuki, but as a daily attitude, it's about constantly seeking fresh eyes.
It's the antidote to becoming a victim of your own routines. Think about your commute to work. You've probably driven it 100 times, and your brain goes on autopilot. You don't even see the trees or the buildings anymore.
You're just blanking out.
Exactly. Beginner's mind asks you to look at the steering wheel, the light, the sky, as if you have never seen them before. It re-enchants the mundane world and breaks the deadening grip of habitual thinking.
Attitude number 4 is trust. At the core of mindfulness is developing a profound trust in your own internal wisdom and authority.
This is deeply empowering. From a young age, we are trained to look outward for validation. We look to teachers, bosses, algorithms, social media likes to tell us if we're doing a good job or if we are acceptable. Trust, in the context of MBSR, means honoring your own feelings and intuitions. As you practice observing your own mind, you realize you have a deep intrinsic capacity to know what is true for your own body.
You learn to trust your own nervous system over the opinions of the crowd.
Yeah.
Which leads us to attitude number 5. And I have to be honest, this is the one I struggle with the most.
Yeah.
Non-striving. Letting go of the need to achieve. I have to push back on this one. How is this even remotely possible in our hyper-competitive society? If I stop striving, I get fired. I can't pay my rent. The whole architecture of the modern world is built on relentless striving.
It sounds like a recipe for total failure, doesn't it?
It really does.
But this is the central paradox that Kabat-Zinn addresses so beautifully. Yes, striving is the engine of our society. We measure our entire worth by external milestones, promotions, bank accounts, fitness goals. But meditation is the one, singular human activity where trying harder actually ruins the outcome. If you sit down on a meditation cushion, close your eyes and aggressively say to yourself, I am going to achieve perfect Zen-like relaxation right now, and I'm going to do it better than anyone else, your jaw will clench.
Your shoulders tighten up.
Your heart rate will spike. You are striving to relax, which is biologically impossible. You're bringing the toxic energy of the corporate ladder right onto the meditation cushion.
So how do we translate that off the cushion? Because I still have to pay rent.
Non-striving doesn't mean you quit your job, abandon your family, and wander into the woods. It's an internal shift regarding your identity. It relieves the pressure to constantly do in order to justify your existence and inspires you to simply be.
Okay, I see.
It's the deep internal realization that in this exact microscopic present moment, you do not need improvement. You are whole and complete right now. You still act in the world, you write the reports, you pay the rent, but your fundamental sense of self-worth is no longer held hostage by the outcome of those actions. You do the work, but you drop the desperate grasping for validation.
You do the work, but you drop the desperate grasping. I like that. You uncouple your identity from the outcome. Okay, attitude number 6. Acceptance. Embracing things exactly as they are.
And we must clarify this immediately. Acceptance is emphatically not passivity. It's not resignation.
Right, wait. Because if my boss is being incredibly toxic or if I'm in an abusive situation, practicing acceptance doesn't mean just becoming a doormat, right?
Yeah.
Where's the line between Zen acceptance and just giving up?
That is the most common misunderstanding of mindfulness. Acceptance does not mean you approve of a toxic situation or that you don't take action to change it. Acceptance simply means acknowledging the reality of the situation completely devoid of your attempts to deny it.
Ah, okay.
Think about how much psychological energy we waste wishing a bad situation wasn't happening. This shouldn't be happening to me. It isn't fair. I refuse to believe this. That denial is exhausting.
You're fighting the reality of the present moment.
Exactly. You cannot effectively navigate out of a burning building if you are standing in the hallway arguing that the fire shouldn't exist. Acceptance means looking at the fire and saying, the building is burning. This is reality.
Only then can you react.
Only by accepting the absolute truth of the present moment do you have the clarity and the energy to respond wisely and take action. Acceptance diminishes internal conflict, which actually empowers you to change things.
Attitude number 7, letting go. Releasing attachment to thoughts and emotions.
Think of the classic analogy of how hunters catch monkeys in certain parts of the world. They take a heavy jar with a narrow neck, put a banana inside, and tie the jar to a tree. The monkey reaches in, grabs the banana, and makes a fist.
But with a clenched fist, it can't get its hand out.
Right. The monkey is trapped. But the reality is nothing is holding the monkey. It could run away at any second. All it has to do is let go of the banana.
We are the monkey, and the banana is our anxiety.
Yes. We cling to our grudges, our past traumas, our fears about the future, and even our happy memories, squeezing them so tight we become trapped. Letting go is opening the hand.
And there's data on this too, right?
Yes, the academic sources cite a study looking at undergraduate students facing high-stress academic environments. It found a direct, measurable correlation between non-attachment, the ability to let go, and higher adaptability. Students who practice letting go could adapt fluidly to sudden new challenges rather than relying on conditioned reactionary panic.
And that led to better grades.
Indirectly, yes. They weren't paralyzed by a bad test score. They just opened their hand, let it go, and adjusted their study habits for the next one.
Attitude number 8, gratitude. shifting from lack to abundance.
Our brains possess a negativity bias. We are evolutionarily wired to scan our environment for what is missing or what is threatening. Gratitude deliberately hijacks that wiring and shifts our attention to what is already present and functioning. And the physiological effects of this shift are highly measurable.
How does a thought about gratitude physically change the body?
Researchers at UCLA Health have documented that gratitude practices, like taking 5 minutes to journal about things you're thankful for, directly interact with the vagus nerve.
Ooh, wow.
By focusing on safety and abundance rather than threat and lack, you signal the brain to lower cortisol production. This lowers your blood pressure, slows your breathing, and activates the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the body's natural rest and digest relaxing response. Gratitude is not just good manners, it's a biological intervention.
And finally, attitude number 9, generosity. Giving without any expectation of return.
This means giving your time, your emotional energy, or your resources without secretly calculating what you will get back in return. No need for praise, no need for recognition.
There's a study published in the journal Social Psychological and Personality Science that looked at the effects of generosity. And it found that people who engage in acts of generosity report significantly higher levels of happiness, emotional elevation, and spontaneous joy.
Psychologists sometimes call it the helper's high.
The helper's high.
Yeah, it releases endorphins. But more importantly, it breaks the illusion of the separate self. When you are generous, you visceralize your connection to others.
So those are the 9 attitudes of MBSR. Non-judging, patience, beginner's mind, trust, non-striving, acceptance, letting go, gratitude, and generosity.
That is an immense toolkit.
It is. But I have to ask the ultimate so what question here. What does this all mean for us as a society? Do we just sit on our meditation cushions, cultivate these 9 attitudes, lower our blood pressure, and become perfectly relaxed, isolated islands of Zen while the world burns around us?
That is the exact trap that Kabat-Zinn urgently warns against. It brings us to the final evolution of this practice, the paradox of mastery and the healing of the world. Kabat-Zinn recently recorded a masterclass series on mindfulness, but at the very beginning of the series, he explicitly tells the audience that this is a non-masterclass.
Why would he undercut his own masterclass?
Because the concept of becoming a master of mindfulness is just another toxic form of striving. It's an acquisitive, capitalistic attempt to problem solve yourself. If you are using these 9 attitudes just to get a competitive edge at work or to become the most optimized, unbothered person in your friend group, you're entirely missing the point.
You're just feeding the ego again.
You're using Zen to inflate your ego. The true goal of mindfulness is to realize you are good enough right now and to truly befriend yourself, flaws and all.
He makes a point for the source material that I found incredibly profound. He says that if you use MBSR just to isolate yourself in a bubble of calm, you aren't doing it right. He states that MBSR, from its inception in that hospital basement, was always intended as a political act.
And that's a startling assertion for many to hear. But Kabat-Zinn views it as a political act, because it is not just about lowering your individual blood pressure. It's about waking up to the ocean of greed, hatred, and delusion that drives human history. Kabat-Zinn views mindfulness as a direct, internal combatant against the lethal us versus them mentality that dominates global politics and society.
He brings up the scientific name for our species, which I had actually never thought about in this context. Homo sapiens. Sapiens. Double sapiens.
Right.
It means the species that knows and knows that it knows. We are the species that is aware and uniquely aware that it's aware. He argues that mindfulness is simply the final common pathway of what makes us truly human.
He uses this striking, almost haunting metaphor. He says that if you look at humanity's current behavior, our wars, our environmental destruction, our cruelty, we operate like the autoimmune disease of planet Earth.
We're attacking ourselves.
Yeah. We are attacking our own host body. But if we are the disease, then Zen mindfulness, the radical act of waking up to our shared humanity and our deep, unbreakable connection to nature, is the potential cure.
When you drop beneath your relentless thinking, beneath your prejudices and the rigid political map you've drawn of the world, you tap into a liberated wisdom. You realize that your well-being is not separate from the well-being of the person sitting next to you.
It's the ultimate realization of non-dualism that D.T. Suzuki wrote about in 1934. You are not the observer isolated from the universe. You are the universe observing itself.
Okay, let's bring this massive journey all together. We have covered centuries of ground today. We started with D.T. Suzuki warning us that Western logic is a tyrant. using mind-bending paradoxes like the flower is not red to shatter our conceptual habits.
We explored the cognitive DDoS attack of the Coens and how they exhaust the intellect to reveal pure, unmediated awareness.
We then traveled to California to look at Shunryu Suzuki, who taught us that the ego is just a guy standing next to a turnstile taking credit for the breath, and that approaching life with an empty beginner's mind is the key to clarity.
We saw how Steve Jobs applied that exact mindset, that fluid Enso circle of simplicity, to revolutionize consumer technology.
And finally, we explored how John Kabat-Zinn brought all of this ancient wisdom into the fluorescent lighting of a hospital basement, secularizing the practice to heal the community of the afflicted through 9 highly practical, biologically transformative attitudes of mindfulness.
It is a remarkable, unbroken lineage of thought. And to leave you with a final, provocative idea today, Kabat-Zinn frequently notes that humans suffer so deeply because we constantly confuse the map for the territory. Our thoughts, our judgments, our anxieties about the future, our regrets about the past, they are just a crude map we drew of reality in our heads.
They're not the reality itself.
The map is not the territory.
So here is the challenge. What would happen if, just for 5 minutes today, you put down the map? What if you stopped trying to arrive at a future destination, stopped trying to fix the broken machine, and just allowed yourself to experience the actual living territory of your life, the messy, uncalculated, non-logical taste of the salt right there on your tongue?
Try it. It might just be the most revolutionary thing you do all day.
Thank you for joining us on this incredible deep dive. Approach the rest of your day with a true beginner's mind, compost those mind weeds, and we will catch you next time.